Welcome back to the tailgate, folks. This is Clinton Miner from Sawtooth Bushcraft. I want to talk to you today a little bit about axe work, working with an axe, chopping through logs. Over my time being a scoutmaster and doing that kind of thing, I've seen a lot of people really struggle with how you actually use an axe. It's a fairly simple thing, and I think if we look at the specifics, that why you do what you do, it's going to help a lot. I've seen a lot of people struggle with how to use an axe, and really it's fairly simple, but if you understand why you're doing it, it makes it a whole lot easier. So stay tuned and we'll go over some of the ways to use an axe more effectively. All right, so you may be wondering why I have some straws here. It just really helps illustrate what we're doing when we use an axe. And I'm going to pull just a few of these out and kind of show you something that has helped me understand kind of how an axe works and what you want to do with an axe to make it work better for you. The reason for the straws is because when you think about wood, a log, it helps if you understand or you think about the fact that it is actually a bunch of long tubes that are compiled together to create the structure of that log. And those tubes act as the structural foundation for that tree, and they work together and make that stronger than if it was just one solid mass. And they also help you illustrate kind of how something like this really works. So if I take, and I'm going to adjust the camera here just a little bit. So if I take these straws, I've got 8 or 10 of them here, and I take a very, very sharp knife. This is a Mora that's just come out of the packaging. It's factory sharp and extremely sharp. If I take my knife and I simply press on those, you see what's happening. A couple of things is happening. We are not cutting through those very well. They are laying together in a flat way, so you've got multiple surfaces you're trying to push through. And I'll illustrate this a little more when I use the axe. But I'm putting pretty significant weight on those, and other than breaking a couple of the straws side as I smashed that down, I really didn't do anything to cut through those. Now, on the other hand, if I come at those at an angle so that I'm catching into one of those, I can cut through most of those straws with one quick stroke. And that's what we're going to be trying to do when we use the axe on a log. So keeping that in mind, we aren't going to chop straight down. We're going to chop at an angle, and you see what it did. What it did is it allowed me to kind of slice through each one of those individually without compressing them, without causing that layer upon layer that I had to try and cut through all at once. And so that's what we're going to do when we're chopping with the log. All right, so another common mistake I see or thing that people do that causes them an awful lot more work when they're chopping a log is, well, let's go back. When I talked about hitting directly on, what I was talking about with that, using the knife with the straws, for hitting directly on, we're just like those straws. Picture this as a whole bunch of straws. We're smashing those down, so we're trying to cut through directly a smashed multiple layer of various materials. And it's a lot easier if we slice a little bit at a time. So if you think about those of you who are old like me, think about Barney Fife was always talking about his lethal weapons. You want to come at this at angles. A lot of people will just try and just hit, thinking they're going to pound down through this, or they'll make a very small cut and try and cut down through that. I'm just going to illustrate here. So let's say that I want to cut this log off right here. So I've got a length of log that's that long. If I want to do that, and I start my cut with this being the left karate chop, and this being the right karate chop, you see that I end up coming down, if I can do this, to an angle that is actually very, very narrow down here. So that by the time I get to the bottom, there's no place for my axe to land. And what happens is I'm no longer karate chopping. I've gone back to the direct blow, smashing down the fibers, smashing down the material, and trying to cut through it that way, as opposed to the slicing action that we did with the knife. So what we do, what I was taught back in the Boy Scouts, was if we simply measure the log, and just a rough estimate, it looks like it's about 7 inches from the top to the bottom, or 7 inches across. What we need to do is start our cut at least 7 inches wide. So if 7 is 3.5 each, I lay my mark on the 3.5. If I want to cut right, like I said, right here, I start with, that's my right slice, and this is my left slice. So I need to take out all of this material in order to go completely down. Obviously, we're using up a lot of material. We're going to end up with a diagonal here that my log is actually only this long. That's one way to do it. If I just want to, if it's a log that I can't roll over, I can't access some other way, I can simply start with a wide enough swath to give myself karate chop-like chops that go all the way to the bottom. The other thing I can do, because it's 7 inches across, I can say, all right, I'm only going to go halfway through the log. We're only going to come down this far. And so with that, my initial lines are a little more than 3.5 inches across, and that would be perfect. Then if I'm really only coming this far, you see that I've got a much nicer angle coming down in. I've got that karate chop approach. Now, I can either do it that way and then roll it over and come up from the bottom with another 3.5 inch wedge. Or most of the time when I'm chopping, and this is going to be today, I lay it on the ground. I'm not actually chopping from the top down, but I'm chopping from the side, kind of diagonally from this side over through this side. And so what I can do is, with that same process, I simply start my chops over on this side and my chops over on this side. So what I'll do is I'll chop halfway through the log this way, and I'll chop halfway through the log this way, and then we'll have it chopped in half. And that saves us a whole lot of work, because if you're just trying to chop straight down, it's going to take a lot of wax. It's not going to take nice chips off. It's just going to basically smash your way through like an old stone axe might. And we want to take advantage of the fact that we have modern tools, at least modern that are only a couple of thousand years old. So that's one of the things. Now, the last thing I want to point out here is, if you remember when I used that nice sharp knife to cut through those straws, the sharper that is, the more straws I got through. I mean, if it had been dull, I would have slid across the top of those straws, or at best maybe kind of gotten into one or two of them. But because it was nice and sharp, we cut in. And that's really the same with an axe. We want that axe to be sharp. And the other thing we want that axe to be sharp for is, if I'm going with a dull axe and it hits and doesn't bite, it's going to bounce. And when it bounces, we're putting ourselves at risk. So a sharp axe is much safer than a dull axe. You're always better off with a sharp axe. And frankly, the sharper you've got it, the better off you are. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate, hopefully, what I just described. I'm going to go ahead and show you the straight through method, at least part of the way, and then we'll take a look at what that does from there. Hopefully we'll be able to hear over the wind. There's a bit of a breeze blowing and it wreaks havoc on my sound, but that axe I used in the last segment is an axe that was given to me to refurbish. It has not been really touched at all, and obviously wasn't in that great a shape. I hope you don't judge me by that. Today I'm going to actually use my own axe, the axe that I typically use for these kinds of projects. It's another one of the reclaimed axes that I've put together. I do a lot of those. We find them at all kinds of garage sales, estate sales, second-hand stores. Had an old age moment there. Even antique stores, we find them in, and they're typically in pretty bad shape. This one was like that. This is actually a Craftsman made in USA trademark axe, so I've held on to it because I think it's a quality axe. We're going to go ahead and use this. The double bit axe I like too. Whether I'm using either a double bit axe or a Pulaski, it gives me more options. And so today we're going to be using that double bit axe. I'm going to bring you in closer so you can see actually how we're chopping on this log. So as I stand, and I apologize that I've cut my own head off. I'm kind of like King Louie. I've really flipped my lid, but I just want you to see at least mainly the log and the axe. So I set myself up, I get a good wide stance, I figure out about how far I'm going to be away from that axe or from that log when I start that chopping process. With a double bit axe like this, there are two bits, double bits, two sharp edges. One of those is quite a lot thicker and comes down to a broader sense before it hits the end, and that's a grubbing or a root or a swamp edge. The other edge is called the felling edge. It's much narrower. It's made more like a knife to slice through things, and so that's the edge we're going to be using. I've got it nice and sharp, and we're going to go ahead then and start the process. And what I'm going to try and do is strike right there, and we'll see if it impacts and affects the same way it did with those straws. Oh, I missed a little bit, but if you see, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull that away. If you see what that did, just like the straws, it cut at a diagonal down through those fibers, the same way it did with the straws. And so, as opposed to, I'm going to go ahead and just hit straight on. I can stick it in the log, but I'm going to have to hit that so many times. I'm going to have to make a wide situation. So we want to make that we're not going to hit that straight on. You see, I only cut part way in. I didn't go as deep as I did with the side cut, and there's no place else to go. I can't, unless I hit that same spot over and over again, and even then it's going to ultimately pile up on me. I need to keep chopping side to side. So now I want to come, again, that karate chop from this side. I want to do the same, and I'm going to try and hit in a little bit because I went outside my line out on this other side. So go right there, and you see now, oh, that was that bouncing off, a little bit dangerous. You see, as I come at this from both ways, you see as I come at this from both directions, how it's just laying it wide open. Now, I started this wide enough that I can go all the way through. But I'm going to go ahead and do the easy route. I'm going to move the camera over on the opposite side, and we'll come at it the other direction. All right, you can see here that I've cut this side fairly substantially. And what I'm going to do, is move it out from the truck a little bit so the tailgate's not in the way. And what we'll do is go ahead and start chopping on the other side. Again, I pick my felling side, my sharper side, and with the same process, I simply start going through. And folks, I'm by no means an expert at this. I've spent a little time chopping wood, but you see how, even for an old fat man, there's a lot less effort as I work my way through this log. Now I'm going to stop right there because I haven't protected myself from the ground below, and I really don't want to stick that felling edge into the ground. If I wanted to finish this log, I'd roll it over. That's the easiest way. If I can't roll it over, then what I want to do is simply be very careful, slow down a little bit, let the axe do the work, and get through those last few inches of the log. But you see that it didn't take very many chops when I'm doing the karate chop. When I'm coming at an angle, we are moving as much wood as we can in a relatively short period of time with very few chops. You hear how winded I am. Part of the problem is that I'm out of shape. It's been a weird winter. We've had the COVID number of things. Those are excuses. But the other problem I have is growing up, I was on a rifle team, and anytime I concentrate, I hold my breath. So I double things up. When I'm going through these things, I end up with less wind because not only am I working, but I'm not breathing. But anyway, I think you can see from what we've done so far that if you set yourself out the right width, I still have plenty of room for those diagonal karate chops. And if I just roll this over, if I can get it far enough over with the branches that are on it, we'll go ahead and see what we can do here. You'll notice another thing I'm going to do right here is use some of the wood to prop it. So you'll notice that I started my karate chops a little too far in, and I put myself in exactly the kind of dilemma that I told you to avoid. So we'll widen things out a little bit. Take a lesson from a beaver. And should take me maybe one or two more whacks there to get that done. This is river maple. Not a particularly hard wood. It is green, and it's done. So there you go, folks. When you're using an axe, make sure it's sharp. When you're using an axe, figure out how wide that log is. Give yourself plenty of space to make those diagonal cuts, and you can get through a log, even as an old fat man, with some relative ease. Clinton Miner here from Sawtooth Bushcraft. Really appreciate your support in this channel. Also want to say that I ask you, if you would please do this, please subscribe and please hit that like button. We're trying to build this channel so we can share these things with you. As I've said a number of times, this is a learning process for me where I'm sharing with you not only what I've learned, but what I am learning. So folks, stick with me. We'll learn a lot of things together. And as we always say here, it says to Sawtooth Bushcraft, if you're prepared, you're never really lost. Thank you.